go. 3, 2, 1.
Mate, doing a really good job. Keep up. Up there.
There he is. How are you, Luke?
Good, mate. How are you?
Ready to go?
Good to go, mate.
All right.
Round two.
Cool.
Let's go.
So I'm here with Luke, and the first question I have is, I'm just doing base Ks at the moment. So I've been training for about a month, pretty hard, but I'm certainly not at my peak fitness or anywhere near it. And yesterday I went and rode Arthur's Seat, which is, for me, is a big ride, biggest ride in 6 months, 135K. So I'm feeling pretty fatigued today. I'm a bit concerned, like, is that going to affect my test? Should I be worried about that, the lactate test we're going to do today?
Well, I mean, normally I'd recommend that we don't do a big hard ride 24 hours prior.
Okay.
But having said that, you said it was zone 2, base
Yeah.
sort of intensity. The test today is only going to be about 20 minutes in total duration, of which we'll spend about 6 or 7 minutes beyond threshold. So it's not even as hard as like a 20-minute time trial test, for example. We'll find out when we jump on your resting lactate. If it's under 2 millimoles, tick in the box, we're fine. That's considered a resting lactate value. So it was yesterday you did the ride?
It's a long ride, yeah.
What time did you finish up?
About 10:30.
So 24 hours?
Yep.
So we should be fine. No, not really. Like, I mean, sure, it's going to affect your VO2 max and where your actual lactate threshold is. But in the grand scheme of things, from the perspective of actually identifying your training zones and giving you specific advice, it doesn't matter if you're peak fitness or just starting out. And we'll see that shortly, but it really doesn't matter because it's a true representation of where you are currently at. Will those zones change? Absolutely they will. But then we do the test again 3 months down the track, reassess the zones, and then re-prescribe training based on your current fitness level at the time.
I was coming in anticipating a lactate test, but you said we're going to do a blend of lactate and VO2. So could you just quickly explain, like, what's the difference between them both, and why am I actually going to do them both combined?
So if you go to any other lab, you can either do a VO2 max test or a lactate threshold test. A VO2 max test is what we did last time, 20 watt ramp every 1 minute. So we want to get you to exhaustion within 12 minutes. The reason we choose 12 minutes or 9 to 12 minutes is because we don't want heat load stress to play a factor. We don't want that build up of lactic acid to be in the muscles for too long. So we want to get you up to your max heart rate basically as quickly as we possibly can, but also allowing that you can't get to max heart rate in 6 minutes. It takes a little bit of time. So that's going to be the best test just to get your VO2 max value. But the point is, your VO2 max value doesn't mean much by itself. It's how can we use that for training. A lactate test, we wouldn't worry about the mask. We'd just take a finger prick. So we get a small blood sample every 3 minutes. So that's a 30 watt ramp every 3 minutes. So it's a longer test. It takes, instead of 12 minutes, it's closer to 20 to 25 minutes. We want to let that lactate accumulate in the blood, okay? That test alone is going to give you your lactate threshold. But what I like to do is to combine the two together, because that's going to give us all aspects of your physiology. If we just do the VO2 max test, I can see how well your muscles are using oxygen. If I just do the lactate threshold test, I can see how well you can tolerate that fatigue when it comes in the legs. But why don't we measure them both? Because it's all relevant to the training methods, okay? So we can build aerobic capacity, so your base case, aerobic power, which is how quickly you can use oxygen, or we can improve how well you can tolerate lactic acid once it's present. Normally, in 95% of people, 2 of those aspects will be pretty good and one won't be. But if we're not measuring all 3 of them, it's hard to figure out exactly what you should be doing. Yeah, and that's why we do both.
Yeah, right.
At the same time.
Because my understanding is some labs just give you a number, and that's a bit of a myth. People just think, oh, you do these tests to get a number. But you actually, once you get the number, you actually prescribe a methodology to improve your performance.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's going to be better for training prescription, but also, even if we did let's say we just did a lactate threshold test. So what we look for is a 2 millimole jump. So let's say, for example, start a test, lactate's 1, then 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3 to 4, and then we go from 4 to 7. Okay, big jump. We know that, all right, we've gone up more than 2, so that's going to be our threshold. What happens if it happens halfway through a stage? You know, it could happen it doesn't, because we only take lactate every 3 minutes. We're not getting that continual feedback, but by having the mask on and measuring your respiratory rate every 30 seconds, we can pinpoint the exact point. It might be halfway through an interval that we actually hit that lactate threshold number. So a lot of the labs, yeah, say that they will give you the numbers, but then it's up to you or your coach or whoever it is to actually determine how to turn that into a training zone. And we've just come up with a method that works really well, that's really easy to understand for everybody. So we get our base training zone 2 stuff, we get our tempo, we get our threshold, and we get our above threshold anaerobic style work, so that we can then give you specific advice based on that.
Great. Should we get stuck in?
Let's do it.
All right, cool.
All right, guys, so what we can actually see is I'm going to take you over to Cam's lactate data, and we're going to see that it's actually quite high at the beginning, 5.3 at rest, and then it actually went down to 2, and then down to 1.9 again. So he's actually gone from rest to exercise, and his lactate's come down. So lactate, or lactic acid, is a byproduct of the anaerobic glycolysis system. So if we don't have oxygen available, we're going to get fatiguing lactic acid in the legs. Now, Cam was saying that he did a big ride yesterday. Did you do an active recovery at the end? Did you do that? You just finished the ride and that was it, okay? So he actually had residual lactic acid in the legs. Now, fun little tip, if you do just 10 minutes of active recovery, so that's actually below, we use 56% VO2 max. It would be the equivalent of, say, Cam riding at, heart rate of 100, 110, very, very easy intensity. That's actually going to, the oxygen that comes into your body, that's going to metabolize lactic acid and actually turn it into water, so water being non-fatiguing. So just 10 minutes after a ride, we'll be able to bring that lactic acid down. We saw it went from 5.3 to 2 in just 3 minutes of riding at 180 watts. Quick update where we're at. I'm about to take another sample soon at 9-minute mark. Heart rate 150, 47.2 VO2 max. The values we have here, VE is how much air he's breathing in, so 96 litres. He got to 230 when we did the VO2 max test. 38 breaths, pretty comfortable, heart rate there at 149. So pretty comfy at the moment. When he gets to 2.5 millimoles of lactate, currently at 1.9, then we know he's at his zone 2. And normally when he gets to about 4, that would be considered his threshold, but we'll keep you up to date with that. Quick update, 161 heart rate, 87% of his estimated maximum. 56.6 VO2, 122 litres. Last lactate reading, 2.3. As I said, when we get to 2.5, that means top end of his zone 2. So we're pretty much bang on it. From here, we're going to get to 3, 4s, and then well and truly above that afterwards. So keep it up, Cam. Somewhere around 162 is going to be that heart rate. Cam working really, really hard here. You can see here his lactate has now jumped up to 5.6. So keep going if you can, and keep going if you can, alright? Finger out. You're alright. I'm going up, it's on you, mate, on you. Come on, in the latter stages now, nearly there, working hard, come on. Good, Cam, that's the way, keep it going, keep it up. 15 seconds in the stage, finish this stage, we're at 360 watts. Next 15, one more 15, come on, get to the minute, Mate, doing a really good job, keep it up. Done there. Work.
So we've just finished the test. I'm pretty fatigued, I can't even talk properly. And Luke's downloaded all the data, so we're gonna go through just over here. All right, so what do we got here? I'm gonna do a little bit of light stretching whilst.
Yeah, go for it, mate, yeah.
Cooking.
Yeah, so we got some, obviously got your numbers here. So test protocol, we did a 30 watt ramp every 3 minutes, so started in 180, we go to 210, 240, 270. I'll go down to our peak values. We hit, we got 30 seconds into 390. We hit our VO2 max at the end of 360 there, which is completely normal. 199 litres of air coming in. It's a big amount.
So why do you only hit your VO2 max before the test even finishes?
Because it becomes a point where, in this instance, we pulled out about 20 seconds into that stage as opposed to the 30. So we averaged it out over 30 seconds, meaning that we wouldn't have got the whole amount of that 30-second duration of how much air you're breathing in. But what will often happen is somebody might even hit their VO2 max 2 minutes prior to the end of the test. The reason that is, they're breathing in more air, but their muscles physically can't exchange the oxygen across quickly enough. So we might hit a plateau, which means if we can't actually use up any more oxygen, the only way that we can further increase our power output is through the anaerobic pathway, which is the lactic acid filling up the muscles in the legs, which is fine, but we're going to fatigue pretty quickly. So we hit 200 litres, 199 litres of air coming in, which is big, 70 breaths, so more than 1 a second. It's quite a lot. Max heart rate today, 181, and your relative VO2 max of 65.9, okay, which is very good. It's, I mean, obviously not as impressive as what we hit last time, which was off the charts, but that still well and truly puts you in that excellent category. I look for sort of 60 as I say, yep, you've got a lot to work with, pretty competitive. 70 and above is like, let's think about winning some races, like really winning some races, okay? So
why was I missing last time? Just fitness?
I mean, a couple of factors. One, 6 months in between tests could play a factor, but also the test protocol as well. Being a slower ramp, and I'll probably better to throw it to you, mate, and ask you, but it's a harder test, isn't it? Like 3 minutes, trying to hold a workload for 3 minutes. Yeah. There's a lot more factors that come into play. The major one being lactic acid accumulation in the legs. Yeah. It's in the legs for sort of 7 minutes at a high level as opposed to maybe 3 because we're ramping it up very quickly in the VO2 test. And also a longer duration of the test as well because we're doing a 3-minute ramp, so you're going to start the heat load stress and not dehydration so much, but definitely heat load stress. You're still dripping as we can see now, pretty warm. A lot more factors come into play, so you won't necessarily hit your peak value. So last time we actually got to 230 litres of air, so you actually couldn't breathe in as much air overall. And the main reason being, which we can go into in a sec, is that you guessed it before you came in, is that you couldn't really tolerate lactic acid when it came in. Yeah. Okay. You're really good at delaying when it came in because the aerobic base is good, but when it came in, it overcame you pretty quickly, and there was only so much you could do. I mean, the key take homes, and this is why we like to do the hybrid test where we do both at the same time, because I like to look at this lactate graph here, which we can jump onto there. So lactate graph here, as well as our fraction of expired oxygen. I'll quickly roll through this first. Okay, so this is the lactate graph. We see it came down quite a lot from that 5.3 to that 2, which is due to that active recovery we said, started to get the legs ticking over and metabolising all that lactic acid stuff. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we look for 2.5 millimoles to be that top end endurance zone. So you actually hit that at 300 watts. That's huge at a heart rate of 165. Okay, so it was really quite comfortable. What typically would happen with, let's say, somebody who was peak fitness, all well-rounded, they've done their base, they've also done their build sort of phase, okay? What will happen is they'll go from, say, 2.5 millimoles of lactate, then they might go to 3.5, then they might go to 4, and then they'll go from 4 to like 6, so to speak. Whereas you can see with your data, you went straight from 2.5 to 5.6, okay? So it was quite a quick jump from being in your zone 2 to then actually being at your top end of your threshold. Yeah. Your threshold zone is 20 watts, from 300 to 320 watts. It didn't take you long to go from being a zone 2 easy aerobic ride to then being threshold. Okay, you've got a really big aerobic zone. It's actually 180 to 300 watts, a massive aerobic zone, but then a very small threshold zone, which is purely because of the training you've been doing. Yeah. Okay. So that alone, and we can see.
I could be riding 280 watts and I'll be aerobic.
So,
like for a 4-hour ride?
So long as heart rate stayed under 165 as well. That's where you've got to be a little bit careful with the two, because you've got a steady state. Like heart rate, if it's a hotter day, your body's under more stress to produce energy, because you've got to send blood to the skin to start sweating and all that sort of stuff. So based on today's conditions, 300 watts. But what I like to do with the longer rides is go by heart rate, because it will account for all those external variables, dehydration, heat load, fatigue from the previous ride, that sort of stuff. Your heart rate doesn't lie, so to speak. It's a pretty good representation of where your body's at. But yeah, 300 being the top end. Yeah, so that'd be quite a lot of watts, mate. But there's such a fine line for you, particularly between 2.5 to 5.6 millimoles of lactate was the space of one stage. It's quite a big jump. So what that really tells me, I mean, even without going further, we will in a sec, but without going further, you need to do threshold work. So what that means is spending time at or slightly above your threshold. So your threshold power is 320. So we want to do efforts, generally a 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, at or above threshold. So an example would be 20 minutes at 330 watts. It's going to hurt you. 10-minute recovery. Right, that'd be a 2 to 1. Or a 3 to 1 would be 9 minutes on, 3 minutes off. Okay. So more work than rest. Or 4 to 1 would be a 12 on, 3 off, for example. Okay, so what we want to do is accumulate lactic acid, have a partial recovery, and then get it back in there again. Okay, by doing that, you're going to force your body to actually become better at tolerating and clearing that lactic acid. So instead of going from 2.5 to 5.6, we go from 2.5 to 3.5, then to 4, and then we jump up. beyond that. The two recommendations, one would be the longer style ones I just said, like 20 on 10 off, but also back to the original training recommendation, and we can sort of see it in this graph here. It's a gradual incline, and then when we hit this point here, which is actually your threshold, it's quite a sudden sharp increase, okay?
Yeah, okay. What's that dip?
We would have been talking.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
right.
no stress. So what actually happened here is, and this is only 2 minutes after we hit your end of zone 2, so it's literally a 2-minute bracket. This is all about aerobic power. So this is, it's a slightly different training focus, but this is that would be the 400 watt one I was telling you about last time, okay? So it's a 1-to-1 work to rest, 2 on, 2 off, 3 on, 3 off, 4 on, 4 off. And we want to have that rest because for this adaptation, we actually want to try to get rid of lactic acid in the system as much as possible, okay? Because two ways we can improve fitness. We can improve the aerobic ability to use oxygen, or we can improve our tolerance of that lactic acid, which we saw before, okay? Look, there's some crossover effect, of course, but they do have actually, in theory, they're polar opposite adaptations, okay? One's aerobic, one's anaerobic, yeah? So for this one, to improve our aerobic engine, we don't want lactic acid in the system because it actually starts to shut off the mitochondria in the muscles. They're what use up the oxygen, okay? So having a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, because we're going at say 400 watts very, very hard, above threshold, a lot of lactic acid is going to come in 4 minutes. Yeah, agree? Absolutely. But then by having a 4-minute recovery, we get rid of most of it, okay? Which means those mitochondria can function and fire again before you do another effort, so on and so forth. Okay, so one's about trying to keep the quality of the both about high quality sessions. The one's trying to keep the quality of the session high, but always have lactic acid in the system, so we have a shorter recovery for the goal of delaying that big spike in our blood lactate. And the other one is actually an aerobic focus, which is trying to give us more mitochondria, so there's more chances of that oxygen to actually diffuse across the muscle and blood to create aerobic energy. And they're the two factors where I can see you doing the most, or getting the most benefit, which is sort of in line with what you've currently been doing. Your aerobic base is great. Like, this is awesome. You know, in the ones into the low twos for quite a long time. So aerobic base, tick. Well, again, it comes down to when do you need to be fit by?
In a month.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I normally recommend starting to put in some of that anaerobic stuff, threshold style stuff, 8 weeks prior.
8 weeks prior.
To an event,
okay,
yeah,
right.
generally, with a real big focus on specific threshold 4 weeks prior. So that means trying to get out on the same terrain that you're going to race at. If you know there's going to be 30-second steep hills, get out and do 30-second steep hills, you know, trying to replicate the race as closely as possible. If you've got 4 weeks, then I would absolutely...
I've got
long
a
is...
3-month season, though. It's 3 months, so it's kind of like rolling into the season as opposed to being...
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, in terms of our recommendations, we try to... If you can do 110% of expected race time for your Zone 2 ride, and it's quite comfortable, then you've got a good enough aerobic base.
Right.
That's the general rule. Now, if you've got to do a 500k event, you've got to be smart. Like, you know, you're not going to go out and do a 500k training ride, but under normal circumstances, if you're going to go do, I know, for example, I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but Amy's Grand Fondo's next week or the week after, 120k's. If somebody's expecting to do that in 3.5 hours, your longest ride would be somewhere about 4 hours. It's not going to hurt you, but it's not necessarily going to benefit you any more than doing an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Right.
Potentially.
And be better off doing anaerobic work.
Going to be more specific, potentially. So how much time do you have to train, and you got to monitor fatigue and recovery. I mean, I do crits as well, and I don't ride more than, I might do a 3 hour tops, but you know, that's just because you're riding with your mate, so to speak. But from a performance standpoint, I'd be keeping sort of 2 hours being the tops, but even an hour and a half potentially. Yeah, you could keep doing it, keep increasing the volume. You might get 2, 3, 5% benefit tops, but if you go do short stuff and aerobic style stuff, the 4 on 4 off or the 20 on 10 off, added around your functional threshold power, I could see a quick and significant 10 or 15% within 4 to 6 weeks just by training a different sort of energy system, which will be specific to the race.
Yeah.
So in terms of your zones, and obviously I'll send these through to you, but your aerobic zone's quite a bit. It's a very big one because you've done a lot of base. So 126 to 165 heart rate, 180 to 300 watts. Right, big range. Threshold's very small, 166 to 172 heart rate, 301 to 320 watts. All right, we want to get that from closer to 300 to say 350 watts by doing more of this threshold stuff where you're right at that limit or slightly above. Okay.
Yeah.
And then your top end zone, VO2 max or above threshold, is 173 to your max heart rate today of 181, 321 to 360 watts. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest one, probably two main ones. The big thing that you do a field test, do a 20-minute time trial test, step test, whatever it is, and you get your zones from that. You can normally get a pretty good FTP, generally, within a couple of watts, right? What I really struggle, and what I'm still trying to figure out myself, but if there's a possible way to do it, but what you can't find is that aerobic heart rate zone. It's not possible. Unless you physically measure blood lactate, how are you going to do it? It's not a percentage of anything, okay? Some people, their aerobic heart rate will be 70% of their FTP, others will be 80%. Yours is very high because your FTP is only 20 watts above it, so yours is like 95%, right? That is going to be very varied between an individual, okay? Whereas your FTP, you can do a field test on that because you just go as hard as you possibly can and you know that that's going to be your FTP anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a pretty easy one to pick. Yeah. So one, you can't really get your aerobic zone 2 heart rate, and equations work, it's a bell curve, it works for 68% of people, other 32%, rubbish, yeah? Rubbish equation. We had a guy here, a 38-year-old, hit a max heart rate of 213 the other day. Wow. Okay, his threshold's 204 heart rate. Above his max, but it's not, it's fine, you know what I mean? So he benefits from actually getting his heart rate up that high. The other reason why a lab test, or especially the hybrid test that we did, would be better than a field-based alternative is that, again, it comes down to strengths and weaknesses. You go do a 20-minute time trial, what does it tell you? It tells you FTP, right? Yeah. How are we going to improve that FTP? Do we need to do aerobic stuff? Do we need to do volume? Is it need to be VO2 intervals above at 95% VO2 max? Does it need to be more threshold style work? We don't know because we don't get the lactate graph. We don't get that fraction of expired oxygen graph. Yeah. Okay, so you know what your FTP is, but then you don't know specifically for you which one of 3 ways you should focus on actually improving it. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've had a guy come in 2016. He came in with a VO2 max of 68, which is still very, very good. He was a runner. All we did was long slow, just massive on his long slow base case. He was doing 10 hours a week. When we did the test, didn't even coach him, just gave him recommendations. And what he did was 2 high intensity sessions a week at that 95% VO2 max. So for you, that was like that 400 watts on for 3 minutes and then 3 minutes off. Within 4 months, his VO2 was up to 80.
Wow.
And that correlated. He was a runner. He was doing a 39-minute 10K, then he went to do a 35-minute 10K after that. We had an athlete who just did a very, very good race it's a triathlete up in Cairns. He won the age group in a 3:55 for a half Ironman. When he was working with us, he was doing 23 hours a week training, which is quite a lot.
Wow.
With 80% of that being base case. He came to me, and sure enough, his aerobic capacity, his base was fantastic. Yeah. So why do we want to go and train base? Well, we don't need to. Yeah. So what we did was actually cut him down to 8 hours a week. His FTP went from 270 to 300 watts in 3 months by doing a third of the training. Wow. I'm not against volume, don't get me wrong, but a lot of athletes are already good at volume. Yeah. That's what they do. Your body's going to adapt to what it does. So if you already do have a couple of years, a couple of seasons of long base Ks under the belt, you're probably already going to be very strong in that aspect. So why would we go and chase 2 or 3 or 4% gains when we can change the training, get more high quality intervals, if that's what you need, which in your case you do, do actually a third of the training, but you can get more performance result. Yeah. Likewise, we get athletes who do have a poor base and we have to do the volume, but it just comes down to, rather than working on the misconceptions of the industry, like this is what we do, 80% aerobic, 20% anaerobic, we use 220 minus your age and a percentage of that. Get more individualised, get specific to what you need to do. And that's it. We don't have any fancy training. It's not like we do anything spectacular. It's just personalised training based on what you need to do. If you came to me without this testing and asked me to get you fit, I could do it as well as anybody else out there, but I'd be guessing, and I don't like to do that. Yeah. Whereas this is quite simple. It tells us exactly what to do. My job's easy. I look at this and I just say, I know that this training session does this is so on and so forth. Yeah. And then we just have to figure out what's the most specific training for your event and how long we've got, and you just do it. It's not actually that hard. No.
So I've just wrapped up with Luke some very good insights for my training over the next month, preparation for the criterium season. Just drop my keys. I'll catch you in the next video.